here at Freedom House. In the past 2 weeks, we've seen enhanced activities from the leader of the opposition as he campaigns for his Congress. And I actually like when the opposition is active, because the more they speak, the more they expose the lack of vision, and they remind people of the reasons why they were a failure in government. They remind people why we must not elect them ever again. So the more they speak, they just reinforce how unelectable they are. And for any person, not even specialists on public policy, but any person with a modicum of sense who knows their track record of rigging elections, and then the 5 years when we were lost in the wilderness. We were running after ephemeral concepts like green state economy and a good life for all, and a whole range of things that never really translated into well-being for people. Then those people would have a reminder of those issues. So I want to spend a few moments talking about the opposition. Now, last week they had a press conference, I think it was, and then one today again. So this was in the face of a visit to the Rupununi in Region 9, and they came back and they reported to the people of the country what took place there, what their findings were. So first of all, the visit was a failure. The APNU historically won Arnaputa. So they had a meeting in Arnaputa and brought people from all the neighboring villages, and it was less than 50 people that they had, Gatamang, Anai, etc. And you saw the Tu Shao, he spoke about APNU, the Tu Shao from Anai, in favor of APNU, but he didn't do it in his own village. He went to Arnaputa. The facts are that APNU could not contest the local government elections in Letem and in Arnaputa. So they've lost support in the region. Those are factual things. The meetings were poorly attended throughout. And some of the people I spoke with who did go, they said they wanted to see this novelty called Norton. That's why they showed up there. And they had a terrible impression of him. He spoke of nothing of substance or germane to their well-being. So he spoke of his finding that the land rights and applications for land extension not being addressed by the government. Now, this is in the face of a government that did not title any Amerindian lands until the last few weeks when it was in office, just before the elections of 2020, where it titled about three communities. They had dismantled the Amerindian land titling program that we had, where we had left $10.2 million US from resources we we earn from the sale of forest carbon to Norway to accelerate the land titling program. They dismantled the mechanism for titling Amerindian lands. We recall also Granger trying to dilute the Amerindian land approach or the titling of Amerindian lands by linking it up through one commission with ancestral lands and Amerindian lands, and we fought against that, and then he had to retreat. So their history on titling Amerindian communities is a miserable one. And for him to go and talk, even raise land titles, it shows how shameless he is. He's a shameless person to talk about us not titling Amerindian lands in an accelerated manner. When the PPP took office, about 6% of Guyana was titled Amerindian lands. By the time we left office, it was over 14%. And we now, the moment we resumed office, we re-established the Amerindian land titling unit, and they've started work. So that's our track record on Amerindian land title. But this guy shamelessly talks about sloth in the Amerindian land titling program. Secondly, he condemned the government for not amending the Amerindian Act. So, first of all, this was an act that was passed by the People's Progressive Party government in 2006. We had a number of PNC members of parliament at that time who opposed the passage of this act. You'd recall the positive features of the act. The act sets out a process to access land. It sets out that communities have to be of a particular size and live on the land for a period. And once they meet those two conditions, they can then apply for land title, and the government is obligated to respond within a particular time period. That was never there before. Secondly, it conferred some subsurface rights to the communities for small and medium scale mining. Now, many around the world where indigenous people live, I can only think of one other country in the world that has done something similar, given the community subsurface rights. Many of those communities have been utilizing the resources and have grown wealthier because of the subsurface rights, and they can now get royalty from the approval of mining-related activities in their villages. And a lot of villages have earned quite a bit of money, but that was a right conferred by the 2006 Amerindian Act. In the same act, we also gave the right to establish rules at the village level and also to some form of internal management. We strengthened the process of elections in the village, transparency around elections in the village, all part of this act. When APNU was in office, they said we will revise the act. But nobody paid any attention to Sidney Alicock because he was just there basically doing nothing. Not a single thing for Amerindians. So they wanted to revise the act with the purpose of diluting its provisions, not strengthening the act, like they sought to dilute the Amerindian presence on the Indigenous Peoples Commission. All of this is information in the public domain. So when they go to say now, condemn the government for not revising the Amerindian Act, they're coming from that sort of history. Again, Norton is shameless to even mention this as his finding in the area. He then talks about the lack of training, leadership, jobs in the area. So they were opposed to the part-time employment scheme. Thousands of people in the Region 9 are now part of that scheme, the part-time jobs. They fired nearly 2,000 indigenous people, the CSOs. We now have close to 3,000 that we've rehired. This is outside of the part-time jobs in the indigenous communities. So this is their track record on job, on training, etc. More people are on scholarships or have had scholarships in Region 9 than in 1 year than the entire 5 years of APNU. Entire 5 years of APNU. So again, that was their finding. Then all villages visited complain about the lack of respect for Amerindian people by the current PPP government and abuse of indigenous people. So that's his finding. We don't respect indigenous people in the PPP and we abuse them. Now, one would recall the last government in Parliament, the minister saying, if you get any more land, a minister of the government, you can't get any money from the oil and gas sector. That was mentioned in the Parliament. Not a single member of Parliament from the opposition stood up and said, that's not the government's policy. They supported this statement when at the NTC, the president, Mr. Granger, was asked to repudiate the statement. He never did so. The same minister was asked to withdraw it. He never did. So that was their policy. Now, you're talking about respect. If you deny people their jobs, take away their jobs, you take away that income from these villages. The 2,000 odd CSO or the 1,972 CSOs were earning over $700 million a year in stipends. They took that away from the villages. And you talk about respect for Amerindian people and abuse of indigenous people. They also said that the oil money is not meeting the people of Region 9. That's one of their other findings. Now, this in light of the statement I just made to you, which was a statement made by the minister at that time, that if you get more land, which they're getting now, you're not getting a cent of oil money. He said that in Parliament. That was their position then. On the other hand, it's not true that the oil resources are not reaching Region 9. We pointed out 1,000,000 times that all the oil money that we collected in 2023, if spent, we can only finance less than 30% of the budget. And that the budget has plans for every region, including Region 9, including a new hospital, a state-of-the-art hospital, etc. So every community is getting resources. They are opposed to the cash grant for people gear, but talk about not getting support for business, the cash grant for business development. So they're opposed. You're getting the picture now. They're opposed to everything in these areas, but particularly on the oil resources. At Babujan, I said that in 2015, the period between 2011 to 2015, they had a particular way of working. The PNC will go to an Afro-Guyanese community and say, that they're giving everything to Indo to the people in Berbice, in the Sugar Belt, and say, oh, they're doing everything to mislead. The facts are that every part we invested in all of our country, everywhere. And you saw signs of that and progress throughout our country. And if you look at the regional budget, you will see that expression. So they started again that Region 9, you're being excluded from oil money. So the implication is that the oil money is being spent only on the coast for other people. They're excluded. They started the same sort of rhetoric again. And we couldn't say it publicly. People didn't pay it. Attention to them. So they spent a lot of money This is not in any fashion characterize their planting and the nonsense that he speaks as policies. we have demonstrated in a written form. He even tried to take the NDS, the National Development Strategy, tried to own it, a document produced by the PPP. So we have our policies are outlined in, you recall the 2015 period, they will fix everything. They will, people would have the good life, they would fix the corruption, the government will be efficient. We lost welfare, the economy started tanking, they became the most corrupt group ever in this country. So who would believe Norton when he says anything about policies, etc.? So every week he talks about this vision, and the Starbuck News gave him a little boost by characterizing his one-paragraph statement as a development strategy. But they were very nice to him on B9. He doesn't have anything, not a single thing. How could you debate a person like that? And you know what it will get into? It will get into all forms of extremism. To prove my point, just to prove my point, let me just show you the two things. Kaieteur News again. Disrespectful for Exxon and government to keep country in dark on its oil reserves. Opposition. Then the next one is approving more oil projects without knowing projected income can reduce Guyana's profit. Opposition. You want, on one hand, you're complaining about being kept in the dark. So we approve more resources now, but you don't want to approve the projects. So we know about all the reserves we have now, but the only way this country could make money is if we actually convert the resources into reserves and then into production. Knowing reserves without converting it into production is a nonsense, because we already know we have 11 billion barrels of reserves and it will keep growing. But what's the point about knowing any more about reserves? And we do get every quarter a report on reserves. We get a quarter, every quarter we get a report. So we got a quarterly report, the ministry, in the last quarter of 2023 on it. So the information has to come to us. But the focus is not on pushing them to do more appraisal wells, etc. Because the focus has been on converting the reserves to production. You only make money on production for the country, not knowing how much reserves you got. So two contradictory things. They want to know more about reserves, but don't produce more. Don't produce more. It's nonsensical. And this is what I'm telling you about no coherence in thinking, in strategy, in policy. They go on a weekly basis to the press conference and they wing it. I'm buttressed, every time I come here, I'm buttressed by a long history of planning with several documents that were outlining government's position. I'm buttressed by years of managing this country as first as Minister of Finance and then as President. I'm buttressed by the fact that we are now deeply engaged in policy and we read the policy briefs. That's what comes here. Not to wing it every week. They wing every week is one, and that's why they're so contradictory. One week they say something, or in one breath they say one thing, and then the other breath they contradict it. Because Norton does not have any policy experience. Just think about the leadership now. Mahi Paul, junior person, knocking around the ministry, getting a couple of salaries in the last government. The Elson Lowe, a junior staff at the SARA. He was working at SARA as an auditor. I thought he was coming from abroad or something. He was a junior staff at SARA. Thirdly, Norton was also, I think, junior enough not to have to submit the statements to the Integrity Commission, because he says, oh, his assets can be buttressed by his filing to the Integrity Commission, but I don't think he has ever filed, or maybe only now he has ever filed, because he had a junior position, or if he had a senior position, he didn't file, so it's illegal. So he has to either admit that he had a senior position in the last government and didn't file, which would have been an illegality, or that he was so junior that he didn't have to file. One of the two, he has to decide. But I've filed my statements to the Integrity Commission. So he doesn't have his juniorness. Well, I don't know if there's a word like juniorness, but in his case, his juniorness, right, is reflected in the policy things too. So that's number 3. Amanza Walton, never policy level. She was working at civil aviation at a junior level too. Roysdale Ford, never been working in government, doesn't have any policy experience. Who else goes to their press conferences? I don't even know the people. But if you look at them combined, they don't have this policy experience or have not worked at a senior level in government to understand in a nuanced way these serious matters. And that is why nobody will put their future in the hands of these neophytes and novices. Who will put their hands in the future of the country or the children in their hand? They know nothing, absolutely. And it gets reflected. So when he talks about policy every week and vision, he thinks that, oh, promising people to fix everything under the sun like they did in the past, that's vision. It is not. So Norton then speaks about PPP losing in the same press conference. So as I said before, I'm very happy when they actually have these long press conferences because it exposes the stupidity of their position. So he says the PPP is losing support and we're desperate, and that they are gaining ascendancy, the APNU. Now you have to be extremely delusional to even think that, much less utter it at a press conference and allow people to hear you say that. Because people should be institutionalized for this sort of statement. So Norton says this, that they're gaining support. We just came out of an election, and under his leadership we're gaining support. We came out of the local government elections, and he got practically wiped out in many ways. In almost every community where traditionally we didn't do well, we've increased our support. We've won some of these communities, like Bartica and Madhya. And in New Amsterdam, we came close to tying or winning. And places like Mocha, we now have people voting for us. We got a seat on the council there. Unthinkable in the past. Here in Georgetown, you saw the difference. Right across the country, in their strongholds, in Kwakwani, in Linden, 2,500 persons more in the town of Linden voting for PPP than in the past. It's a large number of people. That's more than he had for his dismal cost of living rally. He took 2 busloads of fossils from Georgetown, and some of his friends he picked up there and called it a cost of living rally. Imagine he's from Linden, nobody shows up. And he talks about this massive APNU gaining support everywhere. He has to be delusional again. So those are some of the comments from the week before. So this week's press conference, I'm now coming to this week, and just so he focused on the report mainly, and the report that has been in the public domain that I will speak to from the International Convention on the Civil and Political Rights. And he doubled down on something that they did in the past, in the previous press conference, that the PPP rigged the 2020 elections. So again, two words that I'm overusing today: shameless and delusional. Shameless and delusional. And I don't know, or maybe a combination of both, that is Norton. So how could anybody, after everything that has been proven by every observer, by the CARICOM report, I don't want to go back. You all know the history. Everyone in this country knows the history. Every single observer group concluded they were trying to steal the elections. Every country in the world concluded that APNU is trying to steal the elections. An international inquiry has proven that APNU was trying to steal the elections. Norton, they can't even surface their statements of poll until today. And he is, in this day, I keeps mentioning it, that we rigged the 2020 elections and we plan to rig the new ones because we're registering Venezuelans, and two, that the list is bloated. So, first of all, it's not just delusional, but it just goes to show you a state of mind and their lack of trustworthiness. If you can, until today, in the face of all this evidence and in the face of what everyone knows, still maintain a lie, how could you believe a person like that about anything he says, any promises he makes to you? How could you believe a person like that? It's like a person say, the sky is under the earth, and then he maintains that position. When he tells you about anything else, or I want to help you or help your children, how could you believe a person like that? And that is what it comes down to, credibility. They have no credibility whatsoever. I recall in 2015, a number of our people were saying, oh, the APNU cheated and all of that, the elections. And we believe that some of that took place. But I went across this country when even I wasn't General Secretary at that time. I had over 80 meetings talking to people across around the country as to why we lost the elections. I spoke to them and I said, we have to fix these things. Because being in government for so long, it caused, I think we lost some of the energy in that period. Two, we took things for granted. Three, people fell prey to the incessant propaganda carried out by Kaichor News and their closest allies, the PNC and AFC more particularly. I noticed the AFC has gone back to the Kaichor News. So every week, Patterson and Cathy Hughes and all of them make some of the most nonsensical statements. So their whole alliance is back there. But they misled people about corruption. You recall the same issue? Oh, the Marriott was corrupt. I own the airlines. The Berbice Bridge was corrupt. Everything was corrupt. The airport was corrupt. The land deals were corrupt. They had 5 years, 100 and something, I think, audits were done, forensic audits. They couldn't find anything. 5 years of investigation by Sarah, Soku, everyone. And they could not find any acts of corruption when they were investigated, the allegations. So the alliance is back again to muddy the waters. But at that period, I talked to people. And that is when I invited Gulsaran to one of our engagements that we had with the public at Sleep In. It was in 2015 or 2016. And I said to him, you wrote that we were losing somewhere like $35 billion a year from corruption. Why not just come to this and tell people about $1 billion, which projects we lost it on? And don't forget $35 billion a year we were losing, and that's what they put in their APNU manifesto. You just tell the people how we were losing just $1 billion due to corruption. He never showed up. He never showed up because until today he can't do that. Easy to do an estimate, but you have to buttress it by facts. So that is what they did then. I went to the ground, a number of our activists did that, and we work at rebuilding. We didn't, here, instead of taking that line, they tried to steal the election, so we're going to promise this country we're not going to steal elections in the future, and we'll stop trying to divide our people along racial lines. And then say, let's work to be a credible alternative to the PVP government. They've taken denial. We didn't rig the elections, the PVP rigged the elections, and continue with the racist line that they've had. A line that will lose them more support now in a modern Guyana where young people and our people want to move past this nonsense. So that is their entire approach to this issue. On rigging of elections, they'll continue. But it speaks a lot about their credibility. So he speaks about, again, we're registering the Venezuelans. When asked how many people are getting registered, oh, not many. We don't have evidence of many people registered. But it's happening. Now he has discovered a new thing now. He was coming through, one of them was coming through. I don't know if it's Norton. I just saw the report came through. The airport and saw some Bangladeshis. And they come through the airport and saw some Bangladeshis there. So a racist kind of thing. A racist, oh, we stopped the Haitians, that's what they're saying. And oh, you're bringing in the Bangladeshis now. But we had to, I've said here before, that the same person who was smuggling a lot of the Haitians through with the complicity of the government, and at that time they used to meet them airside. Norton or someone from their side said, we're meeting the people airside, the Bangladeshis. It's not true. It's a total lie. It's a total lie. And so they're trying to rework this narrative, their own corruption, when they're caught with smuggling 40,000 Haitians through Guyana. And this matter came up again at the convention, the hearings that we have, the review of Guyana's submission. So this is what happened there. The same man who was smuggling some, I was telling you, the Haitians, he was one trying to smuggle the Bangladeshis in. And we had to cancel a flight where 260 of them were coming on a chartered airline. And he sought and got the permission, but they were coming strictly to be smuggled through Guyana. We stopped it. So The fact of the matter is more people are coming in Guyana now to work. You have people from different parts of the world who are coming here to work, especially on the big contracts. You heard already, we allow them to bring in some labor because we don't have the labor pool, and for the big contracts to move forward, the bridge, etc. I told you about the Chinese had said they want to bring the Bangladeshis who were working in Qatar when they were building some of the stadium for the World Cup. They're the same group building the bridge now, so they would want to bring in some staff. It's not coming here to rig elections. The people are coming to work here for a purpose. But that excuse alone, again, is surfacing. And then I dealt with the list a million times before. I'm not going to repeat my position on the list. So even now, the delusion that exists there is unbelievable. Now Norton says, the last there, that we are paying people to spread that he is corrupt because of the Congress. Now, the People's Progressive Party doesn't have to pay people to say that. If Norton were to go to Norton should just go to the feed, the PNC feed, the PNC chat group, and see how many people in the PNC chat group are saying that he's corrupt. He should go to their group and people from abroad about not using funds. I'm not saying it. I'm not saying that. We don't need to pay people. But the fact of the matter is that they have a big battle. He talks about internal. So we're paying people to say he's corrupt and basically to run him down. And two, we have internal dissent in the PPP as we approach the Congress. So the first one, and how he is incorruptible and we are corrupt. So I've been General Secretary of the party for a few years now. I've never asked anybody to write me blank checks. In fact, I don't deal with financial matters in the party. I deal with every other matter. The financial reports come to me. I don't collect donations or anything. They go, you pay into the party. If you make a donation, you get a receipt. The reports come to me. You can't bring money to me and give it to me if you're making a donation to the party. You ask Norton, who collects donations in the PNC, if you could go to the leader and give him a donation. You ask him if he can collect money, and if he is collected, and how much he is collected. So that's one. Two, I never asked this party to write me 30 blank checks. The finance secretary of the party to write 30 blank checks. Norton did that. So he hasn't accounted for that as yet. He didn't answer it until now in the public domain. You ask Norton why he was fired by Mr. Hoyt when he returned from St. Lucia. Now, I did not know, frankly speaking, that Norton was at one time the General Secretary of the party, the PNC, in the past. But his tenure was so short-lived that he didn't make any impact. Before you knew it, he was gone. So somewhere he got fired by Desmond Hoyt. You ask him why. So he has a lot, when he tries to compare corruption and all of that and the party. We don't need to pay people to say that. In fact, the opposing parties who are running at the elections for the position he has, They've been telling a number of people about this. People keep calling me now to tell me about stuff. APNU people, I suspect they're from the other camp too, and they want me to raise it here. But they gave me a long list of details. I don't want to bring all of that out in here today because I don't want to take sides in their contest too. They should battle that out, because regardless of who it is, they're going to lose the election. So it doesn't matter. It does not matter for us in the People's Progressive Party. Now to talk about internal dissent here. We have a united party. You can't, they fabricate this dissent every time. They used to say that before the elections we'd break up, but there are factions in the PPP. We prove in 2020, in spite of all the dire prediction and about this group and that group will not be unified, we presented a united front election and won the elections. And we do so again. And the Congress, whatever, it's just votes at the Congress. It doesn't mean anything if you get 80% of the votes or 100% of the votes. It's not a big issue for us because it's the vote of the electorate that matters more. That our service to the electorate, not necessarily the Congress votes, that matter. It is what happens, how popular the party is among the electorate of this country. And we have maintained our support. There are people who supported us in the past because they've seen we have fixed the wrongdoing. Don't worry about the sugar workers, have seen it. How they were treated. The miners who supported APNU have seen how we have treated them. Every group, including pensioners too. We're doubling old age pension, we gave them back the water. And a number of people who voted APNU have come to us, and they're part of the family, and you see that every day. We're expanding as a party. So our thing, this obsession about this Congress and everything else, it's not what really we're focused on. We're focusing on 2025, winning the next elections. That's what we are focused on. This is an internal party issue, and we don't have intractable differences. You don't have the leaders fighting and running down each other like what is happening there. Never have that in their camp. Their camp is falling apart. You have some people from the other side who are contesting against Norton, saying that Norton will cause them to stay out of office for the next 20 years. They're saying, because many of them are not even hoping to win in 2025. They know that that is not going to happen. Now, I think I've spoken quite a bit about Norton. So let me now address this issue that came up before the committee. So first of all, we had a submission. This is a submission for the period up to 2021. So the report that we submitted was up to 2021, events around 2021. I haven't seen people carrying the details of the report. It's a comprehensive report we submitted addressing almost all of the issues that you have heard about. We have addressed issues of corruption, rigging of elections, etc. All of these are addressed in our main submission. So Guyana is one of not many countries in the world that allow the individual complaints. So an individual, when you sign on, ratify these treaties, you can sign on to allowing individual complaints or alternately saying no to it. The United States of America, the UK, they don't allow individual complaints. We have allowed that to happen. So the members can raise anything, and we have to respond to what they raise. Every issue that has been raised by particularly Lawrence Helfer, every one of those issues we've already addressed 1 million times here in Guyana. We've addressed them publicly. So it's not a new issue that he is raising or new issues. They have been raised particularly by the PNC. Particularly by the PNC. And we have addressed them. So allegations of corruption, every week we've heard that. We've heard this in the period going up to 2015. I spoke to you about that, the allegations of corruption, massive corruption. They investigated those. They didn't find anything. We hear about a new set of allegations of corruption from the same corrupt people. But we're not talking about, like Cathy Hughes talking now, we're not talking about her corruption and everything else where she was awarding contracts in her own ministry. That's all in the past. So those are not being dealt with now. So a new set of allegations of corruption. We've heard that before. We're hearing it every day from Norton. For the last 3 years, they've started with that. So it's nothing new that this guy raised it. Secondly, extrajudicial killings. From Valda Lawrence saying we killed 400,000 Afro-Guyanese. You remember that? 400,000. Then it got to 1,400. Then it got to 300 or 400. We've heard about this extrajudicial killing 1 million times before. Granger promised in the last report that in 2018 he would have a commission of inquiry. That was the last report. They didn't have the commission of inquiry because I think he was afraid of what will come out, that it was PNC instigated. The PNC supported the criminals who were there, actively supported the criminals that wreak havoc on the country. And the assessment it was not normal crime. It was insurgency by criminals supported by a political opposition. So that's why, although they promised that investigation before 2015, and they wrote the UN, the review committee in 2018 that it will be done, they never did it because they were afraid of the findings. But they can keep mentioning the extrajudicial killing. Now, in the so-called 400 that they mentioned, go to the Stabroek News, they pull out that they did of all the people. Some were still alive. A lot of the policemen were there killed by the bandits. It was a lot of Indo-Guyanese there. They said it was all Afro-Guyanese, 400 Afro-Guyanese. A lot of Indo-Guyanese killed by the bandits, etc. So that has been disproved so much already, but it's surfacing back again in this thing, that the Indo-Guyanese and the state own 90% of the media in Guyana. Again, a racist kind of view. So the ownership of media has not changed much from APNU days. It has not changed much from when APNU was in office. But suddenly, Indo-Guyanese are owning and controlling the media in Guyana. The next allegation by the same gentleman who raised this, we discriminate against Afro-Guyanese. Is this new? Is this something new? Every single day, we hear this. So I see the newspapers writing, writing all of these were raised there. This is not new. It is the same old PNC rhetoric. Oh, that Jagdeo is corrupt and must be investigated. Every day I hear that from Norton, every one of them. I heard that before 2015, they were supposed to lock me up, and they would have locked me up and throw away the key and everything. I'm still here, and I don't think they're very happy with me, but I'm still here. Every day you hear that. Police corrupt, we hear that from them. May Thomas, I don't even know how this came up, because the May Thomas matter, that's a US stopped her. They didn't tell us the details why she was stopped, but this was it. Oh, the media was attacked at the president's press conference. Now, this is the same kite show news. It's a stretch to call them media too now in this country, but the same kite show news, one incident, it felt uncomfortable. You have people, media workers being killed in Palestine all around the world. Here, people come leisurely, they can harass me even at this press conference, the same kite show news people. And they talk about free media. And that the media is under threat because lawsuits were filed against the media. And guess who they cited? By Roxanne Myers and Granger filed 2 lawsuits. So we now have to go and answer that. Granger filed a lawsuit and Roxanne Myers. And if you sue the media, somehow the media is under corrupt. I see politicians in the developed world suing the media all the time. But it's not a problem with it. Rickford Burke is being persecuted. Rickford Burke, a known criminal. And you notice, it was not said that, for sedition, and he might be persecuted for that. They ignore the fact that he's wanted in Guyana, basically, for extortion. How come they all leave out the extortion matter? Extortion is a criminal offense. In the United States of America, he'd be locked up already. This is a criminal who masquerades. The Amerindian Land Titling Act is being delayed. These are all comments from this gentleman who strangely operates, we gather, in an independent capacity, not the US government, but he comes from New York, the same place where Rickford Burke and the others are located. And none of this is all APNU propaganda. This is all APNU propaganda. Every bit of it is APNU propaganda. We've dispelled all of these issues a million times before, but it's consistent with what I said just last week. Last week I pointed out that they cannot gain any traction here. They're trying to recreate the atmosphere of 2015. And the atmosphere was through the lies, spreading different messages to different people about exclusion. You're not getting all the benefits. 2, the PPP is corrupt. So Norton spends a lot of his time. He and Ramjatan went to the embassy to talk how I'm controlling the drug dealers and everybody. So they're trying to muddy the waters about us, again, about corruption and all of these things. So they can't find resonance here in Guyana. Nobody pays attention. People know they're sliding downwards as a party and not going to be competitive. So they go to the international bodies. So it was 2 reports before the Human Rights Commission at the OAS. We have had to deal with those. One by Van der Radzig, Van der Radzig and Hughes. I forgot her name, but Elizabeth Hughes. We had to go there to answer. Now people know who these people are. They don't speak for anyone in Guyana. The next one was the APA, that after going through a grievance mechanism and failing to block the benefits to the indigenous people, they gone there now and they made a mess in the presentation. It was incoherent. I'm ashamed for them. Incoherent. So again here now, They send this out. So I'm sure that there's contamination. This gentleman should say, if he has ever met with this group, with Rickford Burke or anyone aligned to the PNC, because this looks like their report that they emerged from their, you know, the thing they had in Washington, where Rickford Burke tried to extort people, selling them expensive tickets and stuff like that. It sounds very, very similar to that. So I don't know why the excitement, Kaichor News is excited about journalists. Their journalists got mentioned in some report. It's pure nonsense. It's the core issues here are that our people, we have maintained freedom, democracy. We fought for democracy. That's a basic human rights, and without which any other human right could be functional. Two, under the PPP, we made changes to the Constitution of Guyana that puts in place safeguards for addressing ethnic relations and human rights and vulnerable groups. We have maintained the independence of the judiciary. We've maintained that, the separation of powers. These are the core issues. We've treated people, the oil resources, someone asked. Another member, and I think we need to give people explanation. Oil resources, we need to point out about how our approach has been different through scholarships, giving the children more money, the pensioners more money, infrastructure right across our country, more jobs for our people. So we're very transparent. We're proud of our record, and very few countries can go to these bodies and stand up like we've done and give answers. The problem is if you ask 70 questions and you don't give us time to respond, that Gail Teixeira complained. You ask all these questions, people hear the questions, but they should also hear the answers. So we are now going to be in writing, submit our responses to all the questions. We're working on that now, and I think the responses have to go soon. And we'll prove that Rickford Burke is a criminal because he's wanted for criminal matters here. Every one of these issues we'll address in writing, and we will ask them to publish our responses to the questions. We will publish them too. And the next thing is that we will ask that we believe some NGOs submitted statements there. Well, they made submissions. So we want to see, for transparency purposes, we would like to see all the submissions. You can see our submission from government, but why should you keep the submissions from the others? And this is a body that enhances transparency, wants great transparency. So it should be transparent in how it works too. And I would ask the media here to call all of the usual suspects and ask if they have submitted and would they make public their submissions. Because we'd like to see where these so-called allegations originate from. If it's from the PNC or their proxy NGOs, the political NGOs that have come up. So this is an ongoing battle for space. That's why Norton has something to talk about today. He had nothing else to talk about. But none of the things that you see here are new, and we have not responded to in great detail, including the Chinese landing issue, the Senaru, all of those things. Almost everything. This is not a government that doesn't have positions on these matters. It has done so clearly. Now, so we'll be responding, and I hope that they will publish who submitted what about Guyana 2. Now, there is an editorial that I want to tackle. It's called A Constituency in Search of a Party. So I think the Starbuck News here, or people closely aligned, they live in a little bit of nostalgia about the era of the past and disappointment. They're very disappointed, some of the movers, because every party they've supported as a third force has shown that they're not, one, grounded in people's struggle, two, that they're corrupt and practically useless when they have had a chance to exercise power or be part of the power equation. And that is their experience. So I remember the early period of encouragement by the Starbuck News of the creation for the AFC. It was seen as a novel development. Two dissidents from the two-party. Never mind, they were the worst of the lot from the two-party. And they were driven, in my view, by other interests apart from the people, got together and formed the AFC. They never had people's concern as their primary objective. But they fooled the nation and many others, and they claim they're multi-ethnic. So first of all, it is amusing to hear President Ali this week declaring how he and other CARICOM leaders have consulted extensively with Haitian civil society in their plan to stem what is nothing short of a resolution. Closer to home, there are still some citizens left who deeply care about such notions as equality, justice, and accountability, and then that they are being swept away. Civil society here has increasingly been marginalized. Now, what is civil society? Civil society is more than the GHRA, the Red Thread. It's more than TIGI and maybe the APA. You have religious organizations. They are members of the civil society. The government has worked closely with all of these communities. In fact, has supported them to ensure that our people can freely worship, and they can do so with the support of the state, while the state still maintains its secularity. And that has happened in every period we've been in office under our tenure. We've sought religious freedoms have been expanded under the PPP by the promotion of interfaith bodies, etc. I recall when I was president, we even offered a license for an interfaith channel that is a television channel that the state would have contributed to ensure that they can, people can worship, and they can have access to media without it becoming people. And notice the difference between these the Starbuck News definition of civil society and some others is your civil society politicization of civil society. Look at the so, but there's civil society. They will never go to the villages and get that from the people. So they want to kill currency internationally, globally. Falsified a report that they sent statements to the Integrity Commission, so it was undermining it. The government approved parking meter project for the city council. Falsification of the narrative in a hidden report that went to TI International. We would have never seen it had TI not republished the report. But they're trying on our behalf because they would never publish their reports, the political reports that they send up. So that's civil society too. GHRA is another one. But so these are, and Red Thread is already, was the political arm, the women's arm of the WPA, a political party in the coalition. So these are the civil society organizations. I can name them: GHRA that get prominence, the TIGI, APA, Red Thread. Now, what's different about these organizations than the others that I talk about? A few individuals, unelected often, no regard for transparency. They don't have, some of them, audited statements. They don't account for the money that they collect. The money that they collect, well, as we saw with the APA, never reaches the beneficiaries, which are indigenous people. But Stabroek News, and I'm saying the media here in Guyana, will never put these organizations under scrutiny. GHRA is a one-man organization and has been so for the past 30 years. But he gets more, he could send a report abroad and it gets recognized, and Stabroek in an editorial complains about marginalization because we criticize the report. But you wouldn't get a report going from another NGO that deals with children that get the support of the government, that have seen increased support of the government, significant increases. They would never get the same attention. Or if the private sector commission sends a report, they'd never get it because, oh, they might be benign to the government. So This is what we're opposed to. It's one, that the definition of civil society is the hostiles and who are politically connected. They've demonstrated political connections. That disqualifies them from being called a legitimate civil society organization. Two, they're unaccountable. Three, they try to undermine other organizations like the NTC, etc. Four, they're not transparent. They would never share their reports here. That is why I asked you to check if any of them submitted reports, because I suspect they would have submitted reports to the convention too. So we are not opposed to civil society. Just to come back to the editorial, we're not marginalizing. We're fighting these political organizations that masquerade under the guise of civil society organizations. They disguise themselves. And if anybody is fair, if the Stabroek News is fair, they would put these organizations under greater scrutiny. But if you let GAU issue a statement, or the RPA, they would say PPP aligned union, PPP aligned. If the Lincoln Lewis puts out a statement, they would never say APNU aligned, or his union doesn't have membership. His union, I don't think he has any membership. He is the president of a union with zero membership, I think. I have to check it out. So this is the kind of narrative that we're opposed to. Now, one thing that I mostly disaffected members of the two main parties that briefly held the balance of power in our parliament. All of these movements, parties, arose to fill a need among certain. This is, in fact, they're the most racist organization. But, and we don't have any self-interest, but they became the most corrupt group. Corrupt group. About that part of the editorial, I must come. And the person in the elections. So I'm glad that it confirmed that AFC was the third force thing, that Starbuck News is trying to whip up this third force thing. It's not, if a party is working for the people of the country, why they would never ever concede a single day, I guess Starbuck News, that the only party that got more support in Georgetown in the last election is a PPP. The only party that got it. And in every one of these communities. Why not acknowledge that this party is working, and it is working across political divide? But they got to invent these organizations that will that are not racist. So the ANOG, made up of 3 people and a thumb, 3 fingers and a thumb, that's all they have in their party, but they're not racial. All of these are third parties, etc. They can't make a difference to the people of this country. The big political parties have to start changing the 2 things, and this is why I'm talking about PNC. You got to start stop dividing our people along racial lines. Everything is racist, and stop stealing elections. That's all. So it's a nice editorial for me. I looked at it. It has some good parts, but I wanted to talk about this civil society. And if you look, any fair person would see that it's the same names. They're the red thread people. They've been around since we used to go and listen to Walter Rodney speak. The same people are there almost, the same people, they never change. And at the GHRA, I think since Noah Ark days, this gentleman has been there. Since the day of the days of the Great Flood and all of that, he's been around. It's the same group of people that we've had to contend with. And the APA, their leadership is the same. Some of them. So when would they start really calling out these civil society organizations for what they are? They're parasites. They live off of the people. They're unaccountable. They have a very few members, and they collect donations and spend it for themselves. That's what they do. That's what the so-called civil society is here. So these are some of the questions, things I wanted to address. Thank you.
Dr. Jagdeo, the critic for Daybreak News.
You're beating the Kaichor News to the thing?
So I think the Guyanese citizens are seeing the double standard with Kaichor News, and it's evident in their Monday edition. So the biggest article in Kaichor News header would have been UN questions government failure to investigate reports of corruption against the vice president. I think the interest would have been the UN, its importance. But just over that header would have been Israeli forces launch new attack on Gaza, the hospital and so on. Bear in mind, one of the bodies that could do anything and bring peace to the Palestinians and relief to the Palestinians is the UN. So when you look at the double standard as what is the big story and how the UN becomes relevant and irrelevant on the front page of Kaichor, I would like to say, Dr. Jagdeo, there's some truth to what is being said by Kaichor News in the government's failure to investigate certain things, because of the fact recently you spoke about Glenn Lal being responsible for someone's death, murder which has no statutes of limitation, and the government failed to investigate that also. Will the government change its stance on investigating things and looking into things in the future?
So, first of all, the UN did not question us. We did not issue an adverse finding against the government of Ghana. That's the first thing. So when the headline goes, UN says this. This is a international covenant that the state parties acceded to that deals with civil and political rights. We are a part of it. We have to submit reports on these issues. We submitted our report. The members of the committee can ask questions on the report, or they can get it from other submissions. We believe that the questions raised, particularly by the New York man who was there on the committee, Lawrence Helfer, that they came straight from the APNU, because this is APNU's playbook. Everybody who lives in Guyana, who has listened to them once, would see the exact same thing that they're saying. So what he did cleverly, he said, oh, there's public frustration over the failure to investigate allegations of corruption against the vice president, the police, and the judiciary. Now, we can investigate, as the point made by Anil Nandalal, you investigate the judiciary just like that, based on allegations of corruption. So the thing is that, what public frustration? But I heard that language used by APNU, and that is what they're telling people, that there's public frustration about failure to investigate against a few of us. There's no public frustration on these matters. So this is what has happened. They used the question. So Kaichor News wanted to make it look like the UN had an adverse finding against us. And a lot of the reports, adverse finding. And they used that to dig up all the stories from the past. So you're right about that, if they're so concerned about justice. And maybe the police should reopen this case, because I don't think it was concluded with Glenn Lal when he said, I think he said it's in the Kaichor Starbuck News, was reported, when he shot and killed the guy, he said, I think it was a mistake or something like that. He shot and killed somebody and then deemed it as a mistake. I don't think he was charged either for manslaughter or murder. And from what I gather, there was no conclusion to the matter. If a private citizen should write the police to, or the Guyana Human Rights Association should do that. Let's give some work to wake him up and give him some work. McCormack should write the police. Next thing they would say, Jagdeo doesn't like Glenn Lal, so Jagdeo wants him investigated. Why don't we say credible NGOs ask for an investigation of Glenn Lal's murder of a gentleman or a person? We could get that done. Can you encourage the GHRA to do that? And so I don't, a lot of the media here, that's why I said they forgot about the other elements of the report, our submission, and they chose only a couple of things to highlight, consistent with their, well, one, Kaichor News hatred of Jagdeo or love of Jagdeo, I don't know which it is, because for me to make the paper so often, there got to be something special there. But they're not interested in the truth. So I would, can you ask the head of the GHRA to write about this?
Dr. Jagdeo,
Transparency International.
Dr. Jagdeo, one of the questions we raised was a former PS of the Ministry of Home Affairs that was stopped and questioned at an American airport while in transit. It is public knowledge of what transpired there as a result of poor association. not a government's issue. Why hasn't the government come out and spoken to the fact that this has nothing to do with us? Because she was questioned, May Thomas, the former PS, was questioned, and specific questions were asked to her. Most likely she came back, she told her employer what was those questions and why she was stopped. Why hasn't the government come and clear its name in relation to this?
So the issue is the U.S. really doesn't say why they don't confirm why they would deny a person a visa or anything of that sort. They don't confirm that. So the denial of the visa entry into the United States is a matter where the U.S. government has not made it clear to us about a denial. Now, we know generally what the issues or what she was asked about. We can't link that to the denial of the visa, but we know what she was asked about. But when this matter came up, and at some point in time, the US government has not contacted us about those investigations until now. The US government has not, and that's our position when we dealt with the issue in the past, that when the US government contacts us, because there was a Reuters story that sought to link this and the several individuals here in Guyana, and when asked about it, we said when the US government contacts us about an investigation, we will respond accordingly, and we'll let the public know. We have not been contacted as yet.
Dr. Jagdeo, also, one of the issues that have been in the news that you have not addressed, the third force's three-party had come together and formed a third force and now sit in Parliament. It was first held by Lennox Schumann, now it's being held by Asha Kissoon. There's a bit of a rift between the other party coming in. Does the government have a stand on that, or will stand on the side and allow them to sort themselves out?
They have to sort out their own business. This is an internal issue between these three parties. And so they have to deal with this matter on their own. I saw Jonas implying that the PPP had something to do with this. But I've come to expect that from these small parties. They're cowardly. They snipe on the sidelines. And if you robustly look at the same people who talk about other people's characters and about issues that they are heavily critical of the government of, they would never withstand scrutiny. So we don't want to get involved in the internal business of these political parties. That's nothing to do with the government.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo. Kiana Wilberg for Reuters, Guyana Standard, and Oil Now. Just a few questions. Pertaining to your first statement on the reserves, you said government gets a quarterly report that provides you with information on the reserves. And I was wondering if you can give us an idea of what that report says in terms of the numbers.
So I've asked to the ministry on that to see if there is anything proprietary in the reports, and to see if we can't extract the basic. So if the report in its fullness has elements that are only for the ministry and the staff of the ministry, then whether we can't extract parts of the report and make it public on the website. on the ministry's website. So I'm working on that already. But as I said before, the proving of reserves is not such a simple matter. It's not just discovery. I saw somebody said, the oil and gas network, oh, within 2 months after the discovery, they must tell you what the reserves are. When you discover oil, it doesn't mean you immediately know the quantum, etc. You have to come back often and do an appraisal well, or estimate their resources on the basis of the geology, a whole range of complex issues. So they're conflating discovery with knowledge of reserves. So the proving of reserves is a more complex thing. So it has to do with the better understanding of the fields. As you drill more appraisal wells, you can then revise downwards or upwards. Remember, it's an estimated figure. So when you start getting more data, when you start drilling more and you make more discoveries, you can then assess that. I've been vilified for saying, because Exxon reported that their focus was moving to production. And I said, that's our focus too. So we are not this obsession with how much reserves we have there. It's important we get the data, but it's not an obsession of the government. Because even if you know more about the reserves, we have to, the only way we'll benefit from that if the projects are done. And our focus is on getting the projects approved, because it's out of the projects that this country will make money, as I explained earlier. So many people take issue with that, or not many, a few. They take issue with that explanation. They don't agree with it, but we've justified it. So I just wanted to say to the people who were mistaken the discoveries with the knowledge of the reserve, that it's not so. But we get the reports. Our focus is now on utilizing, getting several projects to get to maximum production of about 1.2, 1.3 billion barrels in the next few years, million barrels in the next few years. And then as the reserves grow, because at some point in time they would have to do the appraisal wells, it could justify future projects or lengthen the life of some of the existing projects.
Dr. Jagdeo, I just wish to follow up on that very comment you made. And the reason why I asked particularly for some of the numbers is because on one hand, we're seeing this sort of like epic battle for the Hess shares, and the numbers can give us an idea of a greater idea of why there's this battle that's going on.
Even at 11, the current reserve level, this is a lucrative area. I don't think Hess has done this because of the need, not Hess, Chevron, to know more about reserves. I think they have seen the discoveries keep coming. They know that the reserve will expand in the future, but even at its current valuation based on future earning, I think that is what they've built into that price that they offered Hess. So it is something that I believe is driven largely because of the need to diversify their portfolio, Chevron, but also to get into a lucrative agreement. And this is a lucrative agreement because of that PSA.
Right. Also on another global issue, we saw recently there were reports that Saudi Aramco's CEO noted that the energy transition is failing and the world should abandon the fantasy of phasing out oil. Given that such a comment, and this was reported by CNBC, given that such an important figure in the industry is making such a comment or making such an observation, and there are other bosses in the industry who hold the same view, how do you view such comments and Guyana's drive for a just energy transition? And secondly, the political opposition has actually earlier today noted that the Parliament's oversight is not as effective as it needs to be over the oil and gas sector. I'd like to know what are your thoughts on this, if you believe parliamentary oversight is at a satisfactory level or there is room for improvement. And thirdly, for me, what can we expect in 2024 in terms of the institutional architecture for the oil and gas sector? I know you would have outlined the gas strategy as well as infrastructure for independent monitoring, but what else can we expect to be added to that? And question.
Yeah, so the parliamentary, and then give me the last one.
Okay, and I know that the